There's a lot of hype about shootings, duels, and general violence in Leadville and other Wild West towns during the 1870s and 1880s, but there is a shocking lack of facts. Join me as I investigate the causes, locations, and outcomes of all the shootings reported in Leadville newspapers during that city's tumultuous foundational year of 1879. February 14th. A man named Ed Clark shot an unidentified person on State Street. A trial was scheduled on February 17th, but there are no more details of the outcome. This occurred mere months after Leadville was officially incorporated, and both the justice system and newspaper reporting were still in their infancy. March 10th. Mortimer Arbuckle and associates confronted a man named Jim Bush and his partners for tearing down a shanty they had built on a disputed parcel of land located along Harrison Avenue. Arbuckle made a motion to his coat pocket, and Bush drew his own pistol and fired, killing Arbuckle within 5 minutes. Both men were regarded as law-abiding citizens, and reporters emphasized the rarity of violence in Leadville at the time. The day of the shooting, the local newspaper stated, "The Chronicle unhesitatingly denounces any attempt on the part of the friends of either party to take the law into their own hands. Sheriff Tucker and Marshal Dugan have each organized a strong force of deputies, and any attempt to incite a riot or resort to violence will be promptly met, and the offenders against the law summarily dealt with." Outside of Leadville, reporters also emphasized law and order. The sensible way in which the people of Leadville acting in the Arbuckle tragedy shows that her citizens are law-abiding. One lesson to be drawn from the tragedy is the foolishness of carrying deadly weapons, which are no more needed in any town in this state than in Chicago. Colorado Springs Gazette. The Arbuckle murder trial took place in May 1881 in Buena Vista, and Jim Bush was incarcerated for nearly 6 years after. The case went to the Colorado Supreme Court in 1888, but ended in a mistrial due to issues with witnesses. The fate of Jim Bush remains unknown. April 18th. A man named Pat King shot William McGinnis in his Idaho Park cabin after McGinnis refused to accompany him to Leadville to resolve a monetary dispute. McGinnis died immediately. King then went to Leadville and turned himself in. There is no evidence of a subsequent trial or other repercussions. April 25th. James Bruce, alias Slim Jim, insulted a character named Brownie Lee while he was standing at the stove at the rear of Riddleman and Kaiser's Gold Saloon. Lee retaliated with a punch, and Bruce pulled a pistol and fired 3 times. All hit Lee. Lee was taken to his cabin for treatment, and Bruce was arrested immediately. Bruce had a reputation as a hard case and a man without the faintest apology or scruple. He was known as a professional gambler, but a more pleasant and well-liked man with a good reputation. Lee recovered from his injuries, never pressed charges, and Bruce was never accused of a crime by public prosecutors. April 29th. A man named William Townsend asked John Wilson for a pocketbook to write a check as the pair were walking toward Leadville's city center. When Wilson refused, Townsend drew a pistol and fired multiple shots, one striking Wilson's neck. Townsend had a bad reputation, while Wilson, although he pronounced himself homeless, had a job and was well liked. There was no trial or arrests made, and 3 weeks after the shooting, Townsend apologized to Wilson publicly, and they did not have any further published altercations. May 19th. A patron at a brothel owned by Molly May on West 5th Street shot a prostitute, wounding her in the arm. The report was purposefully vague, as prostitution was illegal but tolerated in the city at the time. When a reporter questioned the madam about the shooting, she was quoted as mumbling the following: "There was no shooting at all. The woman shot would get well. Fight was with bottles. That not more than 2 or 3 girls were hit. There was never a row in the place. But one barrel of the pistol was emptied. Nobody ever brought a pistol into the house. That the girl was shot had gone to the post office. That she was sick abed in her room and could not be seen. That if anything appeared in the newspapers about the shooting, somebody would wear a sore head." June 7th. Leadville City Police Officer Raines was assigned to take tickets and protect the patrons and employees of the Theater Comique on State Street. Specifically, the assignment was to protect the women employed there as bartenders. A professional gambler and theater attendee named Kino Bill harassed Officer Raines early in the evening and was thrown out of the theater. At 3 o'clock the following morning, after Officer Raines had escorted a female employee of the theater across the street to her room, Kino Bill told Raines to stay away from his wife, who was the woman he had escorted, and fired one shot that grazed the officer's head. Kino Bill ran away while Officer Raines returned fire. The bullet fired by Kino Bill shot off the officer's hat and grazed his scalp. Kino Bill did not appear again in Leadville newspapers and was known to have disappeared after this incident. The shooting gained much attention for several weeks, and Officer Raines became a local celebrity as a result. Newspapers reported that his bullet-ridden hat was put on display at the theater for a time. June 14th. F.M. Richie and a partner in the Merchant's Saloon at the corner of Main Street and Harrison Avenue felt that he had been denied shares in the profitable business. During the afternoon, Richie went to the saloon to discuss and confront the owners for the money he was owed, including a man named Jacob Creer, who was also working there as a bartender. Creer and Richie had an argument and a fistfight ensued. Both men then drew pistols. As Richie retreated to the street and Creer was in the doorway of the saloon, both fired shots. Richie fired 2 shots, both of which hit Creer, and Creer fired 1. Creer was hit and died within minutes of the bullet wounds. There were scores of witnesses, as the fight was during the day at a busy intersection in the center of Leadville. A large crowd quickly congregated and a riot nearly happened as bystanders tried to stop Richie and help Creer. Richie ran away to his rooms and police were dispatched to guard all of the livery stables to ensure Richie could not escape. Officers later found him speaking with his lawyer at his boarding house at the St. Julian on Jefferson Avenue. Richie was arrested and went immediately to jail. The trial was 2 days later, and many witnesses made the testimony long-winded, but it was well covered by reporters. Richie was defended by some testimony, as several independent witnesses recalled seeing Richie walking away from Creer when the shots were fired. Both men were well known and had good reputations. Richie was released from jail on June 18th, and the trial was scheduled for September. No further evidence of the trial or its outcomes was found in newspapers, and the result remains unknown. Creer was subsequently buried in Leadville Cemetery on June 17th. June 18th. A man named Butler was shot by an unidentified bartender in Malta and received a wound to the leg. Few details were offered in newspaper reports, and no trial, charges, or result were published. July 9th. A pair of men named C.H. Freeman and Daniel Anderson were leaving Molly Mae's brothel on West 5th Street when Freeman reportedly pulled out a revolver and shot Anderson for no reason, missing him. Freeman ran away and Anderson went home. Both men were reported to be on friendly terms again the next day. July 14th. A group of gamblers started to fight at the Empire Saloon on Jefferson Avenue after a dispute while playing cards. During the fistfight, a man named Poisler took out a pistol and fired randomly into the fray, hitting Binkerhoff, who was standing on the sidelines and not involved. No details of injuries, arrests, charges, or other issues were reported in newspapers thereafter. September 14th. A man named Ned Aisley shot a bartender named Matt D. as D was taking tickets at the Athenium Theater. The ball injured D's arm and back. Several witnesses were taken to jail with Ainslie. The report was made by a Denver reporter who happened to be in town that day. There was no further reporting on this incident in statewide newspapers, as Leadville newspapers from this time are not available. September 26th. A land dispute erupted into armed conflict when the ownership of the Buckeye Bell Mine on Carbonate Hill was contested. Both sides dug trenches and the standoff escalated. On one side was a Denver-based investment company, and on the other a Leadville-based mining company. As tensions culminated, one shot rang out from an unknown location, and both entrenched parties opened fire with their rifles. One man was killed and 6 were injured after a day of fighting. 2 cabins with families nearby had to be evacuated during the fighting. The one and only casualty was a young man named Michael O'Connor, who was not participating but unfortunately had been at the battle simply to watch. November 15th. An unnamed man pulled a pistol on another during an argument at Spencer's Saloon on Harrison Avenue. The pistol misfired. The other man beat the gunman with a hot poker from a nearby stove. Both were kicked out of the saloon by the owner. No arrests or charges were reported. On the same day, November 15th, 2 Leadville police officers responded to pistol shots fired at the Slack Saloon on State Street and found the bartender, John Gorman, pacing, mumbling under his breath, with a pistol in his hand, and a man named Thomas Gorman wounded on the floor. No relation. The bartender was immediately arrested and the victim was taken to a neighboring saloon to be cared for. He was not injured severely and recovered quickly. The bartender was tried the following day, fined $20 for disturbing the peace, and was released. December 13th. A former police officer named Moran was in Ed Murray's saloon on State Street when a group of men with a vendetta against him entered. A shot was fired and hit Moran in the heart, killing him instantly. The perpetrators left quickly and were not stopped or detained. Several days later, a posse went to arrest a man named John Creer, who had been identified by witnesses at the saloon during the shooting. At the time, Creer was living east of Leadville in a gulch near Mosquito Pass. He was taken to Leadville and indicted on witness testimony. When word got out that he had been identified, a mob formed to exact justice and stormed the jailhouse. Upon seeing the crowd forming, Creer was taken by Leadville police to a safe house outside the jail, but a mob of concerned men found him being escorted to the safe house by Leadville police officer J.A. Walker. Both Officer Walker and Creer were forced at gunpoint into a nearby barn, and a noose was put around Creer's neck. He refused to admit to the crime even as the mob closed in. For a moment, the vigilantes hesitated, and Officer Walker, using reason and eloquence, convinced them to spare Creer, and he was taken back to the jail. Creer was given a trial several months later, but was released. Leadville and other western boomtowns are often romantically and comically shown as wild and woolly, but rarely are nuanced and accurate stories told to back up those claims. Violence is an unfortunate tendency of humanity, universal to all cultures, and not bounded by space or time. Barroom brawls and shootouts sell on television and movies, but sometimes it's worth taking a closer look at the details of the matter to find these more compelling, long-forgotten stories.